Have you ever witnessed a moment in sports when pure leadership transcends flashy moves or outrageous highlight reels? When a team's heart seems to beat in sync with its captain, quietly guiding them to heights most thought impossible? That's the story of Steve Yzerman, the man often called the captain, who led the Detroit Red Wings from league afterthought to one of the NHL's most formidable dynasties. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the humble, soft-spoken legend who changed Hockeytown forever, proving that sometimes the loudest impact in sports is made by the quietest voice in the room. If you trace Steve Yzerman's journey back to his roots, you'll find a kid from Cranbrook, British Columbia, whose initial hockey dreams were no grander than any other Canadian youngster on the local ice. He wasn't touted like Wayne Gretzky, nor was he anointed a generational prodigy. Yet scouts who watched him even in junior hockey saw a spark, an intense but understated fire that flickered behind a calm demeanor. That was enough to convince the Detroit Red Wings to take a chance on him with the 4th overall pick in the 1983 NHL draft. They needed a playmaker, a future cornerstone, to revive a once proud Original Six franchise that had fallen on tough times. Little did they know, they'd just drafted a captain in waiting who would redefine everything about their organization. The Detroit Red Wings Yzerman stepped into were far from the perennial contenders we think of today. The team had struggled for years, so the city's fan base pinned its hopes on the fresh-faced teenager nicknamed Stevie Y. From the very start, you could see flashes of brilliance, an uncanny hockey IQ, a sneaky wrist shot, and that poised on-ice presence that belied his age. Even as a rookie, he put up impressive point totals and earned a leadership role, but success didn't come instantly. The Red Wings missed the playoffs in his first season, and critics wondered whether a 19-year-old really had what it took to lead a franchise stuck in the NHL's basement. Yet Yzerman approached each setback with the same quiet determination. No outbursts, no dramatic proclamations, just hard work and the conviction that he could turn things around. He didn't have to wait long to assume more responsibility. In 1986, at just 21 years old, Yzerman became the Red Wings captain, a title he'd hold for the next 2 decades, longer than any other captain in NHL history with a single franchise. Think about that. He was a young man thrust into one of the most scrutinized positions in professional hockey, yet he handled it with grace. While other stars around the league grabbed headlines with brash statements or highlight reel exploits, Yzerman led by example. His voice in the locker room was calm, but carried a weight few could ignore. If he criticized himself after a loss, you knew he was in the weight room the next day, determined not to repeat the same mistakes. If he stood up for a struggling teammate, that teammate would fight twice as hard, knowing Stevie Y had his back. During the late 80s and early 90s, the Red Wings improved, flirting with playoff success, but never quite breaking through. Yzerman dazzled with his scoring prowess, eclipsing 100 points in multiple seasons, and established himself as one of the league's elite offensive players. Yet, questions persisted. Could he lead them to a Stanley Cup? The Red Wings kept running into roadblocks, veteran-laden squads like the Edmonton Oilers or the unstoppable Mario Lemieux and his Pittsburgh Penguins. Detroit's faithful fans grew restless. Yzerman never complained about the mounting pressure. He simply dug deeper, evolving his game from that of a pure scorer into a two-way force. He didn't just rack up points. He killed penalties, blocked shots, and took on the toughest defensive assignments. It was as if he understood that to break the ceiling, he had to be more than a star. He had to embody the team's identity. It all began to coalesce when the Red Wings brought in Scotty Bowman as head coach in 1993. Bowman was a coaching legend with a reputation for demanding discipline and accountability from his players. At first, some wondered how Yzerman, already a seasoned captain, would mesh with Bowman's direct, sometimes abrasive style. But in typical Yzerman fashion, he absorbed the critique, adapted, and found new layers to his leadership. Bowman challenged him to become the ultimate two-way center, a man who could silence the league's best forwards and still produce crucial offense. Yzerman rose to the occasion, proving that he was willing to sacrifice personal stats if it meant molding Detroit into a championship-caliber team. Then came the mid-90s, and with them, an influx of world-class talent. Sergei Fedorov, Nicholas Lidstrom, and Brendan Shanahan, among others. Detroit boasted a potent mix of European skill and North American grit. a combination that Bowman harnessed brilliantly. On paper, they looked unstoppable. In reality, heartbreak after heartbreak tested them. Surprise playoff exits, a sweep in the 1995 Stanley Cup Final, and a bitter loss in the 1996 Western Conference Finals to the Colorado Avalanche. A defeat that lit the fuse on what would become one of the fiercest rivalries in modern NHL history. Through it all, Yzerman's presence was unshakable. He was the eye in the storm of rising tensions, a steady hand on the wheel while teammates clashed with hated rivals, and the city demanded a parade down Woodward Avenue. The turning point came in the 1997 playoffs. The Red Wings, driven by a mix of redemption and vengeance for years of near misses, marched through the postseason. Standing in the way of their ultimate goal was the Philadelphia Flyers, a powerhouse with the fearsome Legion of Doom line. Many predicted the Flyers' brute force would wear down the Red Wings. Instead, Detroit played clinical, disciplined hockey, buoyed by Yzerman's impeccable leadership. In the locker room, Yzerman wasn't one to give fiery speeches. He'd simply remind his teammates of their potential, of how far they'd come, and of the hunger Detroit fans had endured for decades. On the ice, he led by cutting down the Flyers' offensive threats, setting up key goals, and winning critical face-offs. The Red Wings swept the Flyers in 4 games, and after 42 long years, the Stanley Cup finally returned to Detroit. That image of Yzerman hoisting the cup at Joe Louis Arena, tears of joy and relief visible even through his playoff beard, became an instant Detroit sports classic. The city erupted in celebration, a catharsis decades in the making, with Captain Steve at the center of it all. He'd proved the doubters wrong, validated the faith of a proud franchise, and etched his name alongside Detroit legends like Gordie Howe and Ted Lindsay. And yet, in the chaotic aftermath of that triumph, with fans chanting his name and cameras flashing, his interviews remained humble. He deflected credit to his teammates, praising their contributions and resilience. If ever there was a moment to indulge in personal glory, it was that night. Yzerman chose gratitude instead. But the story didn't end there. Rather than rest on their title, Yzerman and the Red Wings came back in 1998, determined to prove the previous year wasn't a fluke. They battled adversity off the ice, most notably the tragic limo accident that left defenseman Vladimir Konstantinov critically injured. Wearing a Believe patch on their jerseys, the Wings dedicated their season to their fallen teammate. Yzerman, carrying the weight of the tragedy on his shoulders, guided the team to another cup. After their Game 4 victory over the Washington Capitals clinched back-to-back championships, Yzerman immediately handed the cup to Konstantinov, who was in a wheelchair. The entire hockey world watched a poignant moment of sports transcending competition, a moment that showed the depth of brotherhood forged under Yzerman's captaincy. In 2002, the Red Wings loaded up with a roster that looked like an all-star team: Brett Hull, Luc Robitaille, Chris Chelios, Dominik Hasek, and more. Yzerman was still the captain, but at 36, his body was wearing down, his knees a source of constant pain. Even so, he continued to lead, sacrificing his own comfort to help the team chase glory one more time. You could see him grimace after every shift, wincing through surgeries and rehab, yet never missing a crucial game. The Red Wings won their 3rd cup in 6 years, and for Yzerman, a man whose quiet sacrifice epitomized the heart of that team, raising the trophy yet again felt like the ultimate vindication of his leadership style. He'd guided a supergroup of Hall of Famers to hockey's pinnacle, even as his own physical limits were being tested beyond belief. That 2002 Cup run further cemented Yzerman's legacy, not just in Detroit, but across the NHL. Players from other teams spoke in awe of his balanced approach, a man fiercely competitive on the ice, gracious and respectful off it. Fans marveled at how he remained an offensive threat, despite chronic injuries, while still anchoring the penalty kill and outsmarting younger, faster opponents. Coaches admired him as a strategic thinker who understood matchups, shift lengths, and the psyche of his teammates. If the modern NHL has produced a blueprint for the perfect captain, Yzerman might be the template. He eventually retired in 2006, leaving behind a resume that read like hockey royalty: 10-time All-Star, a Conn Smythe Trophy for playoff MVP, a Selke Trophy for top defensive forward, and, of course, 3 Stanley Cups as captain. He remains among the highest scorers in NHL history, yet the numbers only tell part of the tale. The aura around Steve Yzerman goes deeper. He was the linchpin of a revival that turned Detroit from the Dead Wings into Hockey Town, a legacy that turned Joe Louis Arena into a cathedral of the sport. Ask any Red Wings fan, and they'll speak about him with a reverence usually reserved for legends like Gordie Howe or Nicholas Lidstrom when the team raised his number. 19 to the rafters, you could feel the emotional weight in the crowd, a collective tip of the hat to everything he'd done for the city. When he moved into a management role, first with the Red Wings front office, then as general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning, he brought the same quiet confidence that marked his playing career. Tampa Bay, under his leadership as GM, transformed into a perennial contender, ultimately capturing the Stanley Cup in 2020 and 2021 after Yzerman's tenure there laid the groundwork. His fingerprints were all over that roster, drafting key players, hiring the right coaches, instilling a culture of humility and excellence. Even away from the ice, you could see echoes of his calm, methodical approach, the approach that had made him such a transcendent captain for so many years. But what truly made him stand out in hockey's pantheon? In an era of superstar flair and outsized personalities, Steve Yzerman led with integrity, dedication, and an almost stoic presence. He didn't scream at opponents or belittle teammates. Instead, he inspired a collective will to win, insisting that everyone buy in, from the marquee scorers down to the last guy on the bench. It was a style that demanded respect without a single raised voice, and time after time, it paid off in the most critical moments. Even fans of rival teams had to acknowledge the intangible aura he brought to every rink he entered. Critics might say that Yzerman benefited from a well-funded organization, an influx of high-end talent, and a Hall of Fame coach. But, as hockey history shows, many star-laden teams have crumbled under pressure. The difference in Detroit was the culture of accountability and selflessness Yzerman championed. When Scotty Bowman pushed for more defensive responsibility from everyone, including the star forwards, Yzerman was the first to adapt. That example echoed down through the lineup, giving Bowman's system credibility. Without a leader willing to adapt his game for the greater good, even the most talented rosters can fracture. With a leader like Yzerman, the Red Wings evolved into a fearsome machine that left an indelible mark on the NHL. Today you can see Steve Yzerman's legacy in the generation of players and GMs who highlight leadership as much as skill. Guys like Sidney Crosby or Jonathan Toews, captains known for their strong two-way game and understated style, bear more than a passing resemblance to the model Yzerman perfected. His approach also resonates with fans who appreciate a quiet hero, someone who doesn't always seek the spotlight, but who invariably shines brightest when the stakes are sky high. It's no coincidence that Yzerman's name still surfaces in debates about the greatest captains ever to lace up skates. The impact he had on teammates, on the city of Detroit, and on the broader narrative of the NHL remains unmatched. In the end, maybe that's the most remarkable part of Steve Yzerman's story, how he balanced elite individual skill with a willingness to do whatever the team needed. He could be the 100-point superstar or the shutdown center. He could lead a rebuild or anchor a dynasty chasing multiple cups. He could handle media frenzy or stay in the background, ensuring that the focus was on collective success. And he did it all with a quiet dignity that earned him universal respect. So, what do you think? Does Steve Yzerman deserve a place on hockey's Mount Rushmore of captains? Or do you believe there's another leader who embodied the essence of captaincy even more? Let us know in the comments, because when you talk about the quiet NHL legend behind Detroit's dynasty, you're talking about more than just another great player. You're talking about a man whose calm presence and unbreakable will turned the Detroit Red Wings into a team for the ages. And that, more than any single stat line or trophy, stands as the ultimate testament to Steve Yzerman's legacy.